Next year, we might get 100 or 200 real estate STOs out, and the year after that, it could be 1,000. We see Wyoming as one of the best jurisdictions right now. I can speak about the market in Denmark very, very, very quickly because it's extremely small. I'm actually quite skeptical towards the security token exchanges, and I think we're actually going into that hype cycle again a little bit now.
Hello everyone, it's my pleasure to see you again at next issue of Stobox interview. My name is Boris Pikalov, I am co-founder and head of analytics at Stobox and your all-time host. Today we are welcoming our next guest, Claus Skaaning. Claus is co-founder at DigiShares, another tokenization platform. He is also PhD in Bayesian network and extremely experienced CEO whose first CEO position was back in 2001. Claus, it's a pleasure to see you here.
Likewise, it's a great pleasure to be part of your interview series.
Also, we have Ross, the Chief Operating Officer at Stobox and co-founder. Ross, it's a pleasure to have you here as well.
Yeah, thank you, Boris. It is a pleasure.
We met DigiShares and Claus previously. I have spoken at Fintech Disruption Summit organized by DigiShares, and you can find their videos on YouTube with many great speeches. And as you should remember, we are also hosting a conference on November 13, 14. So make sure to check it out. Claus, thanks for joining us today. Please tell us more about yourself, your history, and what you're doing now at DigiShares.
Yeah, as mentioned, I have a background in computer science. I have a PhD in computer science actually many years ago. So I have a background originally as a researcher, but I was lucky enough to get into a project with Hewlett Packard to commercialize AI research for troubleshooting of technical service equipment, and worked on that for some years until we were so happy to be able to do a spin out from HP and create our own company. So that was basically my first entrepreneurial experience and my first sort of way into business. And I didn't have the goal for myself to become an entrepreneur back then, so it was a bit accidental for me to take that step forward. But I became the CEO of that company and worked there for more than 10 years, taking the company to exit at the end and being quite successful with that. So around 4 or 5 years ago, I stopped in that company and looked for new projects and new career options, and worked on a number of projects that eventually led to DigiShares. I'm a big believer in the ideas behind blockchain. In general, I like the vision and some of the potentials that we can see realized in the future. I think are great and will be very beneficial for all of us. So I'm happy to be part of that.
Thank you for your reply. As we know, DigiShares is situated in Denmark with your headquarters. Please tell us about the ecosystem for tokenized securities and blockchain in Denmark. Do you target local market as well or only international, and how successfully?
I can speak about the market in Denmark very, very, very quickly because it's extremely small. In general, if we look at the STO ecosystem or tokenization ecosystem in Denmark, it's non-existent, and it's actually the same for the rest of the Nordics. I hope I'm not insulting anyone, but there's basically nothing going on, and it's for regulatory reasons. We simply have no clarification on the legal side of how to tokenize company equity, for instance. So that's keeping us back, but of course we're working on it. We are in a process with the Danish regulator in order to clarify the legal aspects of tokenization, and we are also sort of indirectly connected with one of the other regulators in the Nordics. So we try to push the process forward, and we try to achieve clarification in that field. In Denmark, we are lucky enough to have legislation that is sort of prepared for a digital version of securities. We don't need paper-based stock certificates, for instance. Everything can be done in a digital manner. So it's a smaller step sort of to also work into a tokenized ecosystem for that, but still there are some legal issues that needs to be clarified. Once that is in place, then of course we will do more business locally here. And in fact, I foresee that Denmark could become a good jurisdiction in Europe for European projects because it's relatively cheap to operate here. It's a trustworthy jurisdiction. So for that reason, we don't do any business here. We have our jurisdiction, we have our headquarters here, but we operate globally in many countries, but not Denmark at all.
Yeah, we have a similar story with Ukraine. We have our headquarters and most of the team here, but the legislation is not there yet. And we are
Yeah.
also working with local government to help them in the development of right legislation for virtual assets and tokenization. And even
Yeah.
though there is interest in local markets from real estate developers and industrial companies, currently we are advising to all of them to structure the STO in other jurisdictions such as
Yes.
Wyoming or Switzerland or anything like that.
Exactly the same for us. We see actually, so it's curious you mentioned Wyoming. We see Wyoming as one of the best jurisdictions right now to work out of. It's inexpensive and it's uncomplicated. If you compare it to many other jurisdictions, like for instance Switzerland and Liechtenstein, I think it's relatively complicated and it's quite expensive.
Definitely. We also
Definitely.
advise Wyoming as one of the primary options and actually are doing our own STO as the Wyoming Corporation.
Great.
And regarding the regulation and legislation of Nordic countries, so what do you think? How should regulation evolve in order to enable the digital securities ecosystem in these countries?
Yeah, I'm not an expert of the jurisdiction in all the Nordic countries, but I know that in some of the countries, for instance, you need to have transfers of securities notarized, for instance, which makes it difficult to have a fully automated, digitized process. That needs to be somehow converted to a digital process. In Denmark, we don't have that problem. We are almost prepared for a digital tokenized version of company equity, for instance, but there are some issues that need to be clarified. And I think the regulators are generally quite positive towards helping us and going into this space here.
Yes,
Yeah.
because as we see on the market, there are a lot of STO traction regarding the institutional clients. And once the countries enable the digital securities laws and legislation, they open a new opportunities and
Yeah.
like the money box for other clients and for other
Yeah.
deals regarding the digital securities. And yeah, thank you for insightful answer. I know that you received a grant from the government of Denmark. First of all, congrats with these achievements. It is great. And is there an interest in tokenization from the government? So are they helping you or other companies in promotion among local businesses?
Yeah, it's a good question. We actually received 2 grants recently. So we have a very good, you could say, support system for innovation in Denmark that is generally supportive of businesses with high potential, startups with high potential, with a high degree of innovation. So we managed to get those 2 grants because we are perceived as a company, of course, with good degree of innovation. And I think that we got the grants not due to working with blockchain, but rather maybe in spite of working with blockchain, because generally crypto and blockchain are not so highly regarded here. It is viewed with some degree of skepticism. We try to always position ourselves as a non-crypto company, but rather a company working with blockchain infrastructure, using the blockchain to achieve a good value proposition for ordinary non-crypto users.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that helps us sort of in dealing with the government organizations. Generally, the government in Denmark is not aware of blockchain, I think, and not really active. And it's the same for the financial industry here. It is not into blockchain, but hopefully it will come in the future. But we have organizations here that are very supportive. We are very much aligned with a local organization called Copenhagen Fintech, which has been an extremely quickly growing organization for fintech companies in Denmark. That has helped a lot with boosting our activities, getting good mentors, good advice, reaching investors, helping promoting our business, helping us to do webinars and so forth, and also to reach business partners in foreign markets. So we are supported well in that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. I would say it's really a problem that despite cool opportunity that blockchain opens in many industries and many applications, that fact that cryptocurrency and actually cryptocurrency scams were one of the first applications, the general view of the blockchain is not as good as it could be. And add to that also inflated expectations that were on the first stages. And this is true about STO market as well. I remember back in 2018, the expectation from the STO were that they will take market like in a year, and everybody understood that building infrastructure takes time.
Yeah.
And please tell us your story in the last 2 years, how DigiShares was evolving in this hype cycle and building infrastructure, working with clients and understanding, finding your right product market fit.
Actually, I think so. We've been part of the hype cycle as well, and part of the reason we started the company originally was also because we were stuck in the same hype cycle and believed in it. And I think we're actually going into that hype cycle again a little bit now. We're seeing a similar kind of extremely increasing activities right now, but hopefully it's with better projects and real substance behind it. So we actually started a project called Venture Fusion back in 2017. The Venture Fusion was a decentralized incubator on the blockchain, where the goal was to enable startups to bootstrap and use tokenized company equity as a payment, as a means of payment for anyone participating in the project. And so actually already at a very early stage, we looked at tokenized company equity because we needed it in our own project. We didn't per se want to develop a platform for it, but we just needed it as a technology in our own project. But it opened our eyes to see that it was a new industry that was coming forward. We went to one of the first conferences in Europe to learn more about it, and sort of realized that this was maybe where the goal was for us, and sort of decided to relaunch, to pivot the company, and to go in the direction of actually developing direct infrastructure for tokenization instead, and yeah, to focus in that direction. So we did that in early 2018, and I think that was a very good decision. But as you said, the market has not been developing as fast as expected. It has in fact been developing, I think, quite slowly over the past couple of years, and we saw some colleagues in the industry fall away, not being able to wait for the positive news that we are seeing now. But now I really feel that it's taking off. We are seeing a tremendous amount of interest right now from a lot of different types of projects that are interested in tokenization. So I think it has to do with the regulation finally opening up, and sort of the infrastructure pieces coming together, so that we are starting to see critical mass and also efficient education of the market, so that potential project owners are actually coming to us in order to investigate how we can help them.
Yeah, I hope this wave of tokenization really takes off when the infrastructure and the secondary markets and everything is at last there in some sense, although they still need some time to grow more. We've been discussing this with other speakers on our interview with David Wield from Nasdaq, with Royal
Yeah.
Wolfert from Netherlands, different things about what is necessary for the mass adoption actually. Is this the tokenization of symbolic projects that everybody want? Is it the additional points in the infrastructure? What is this critical element that is lacking?
It's a good question. I think many people believe it's the security token exchanges that are needed, but I'm actually not so sure myself. I think it's other factors. I think the industry has been looking for the right value proposition and maybe product market fit, actually, and we need to really provide real value to our end customers, the issuers and the investors. And I think it's taken some time sort of to realize how to do that, and we are not there yet. I think actually that is one problem that I think the entire industry has been sort of working towards resolving. And then it's certainly the regulatory side as well, which is, I think, still really in a poor situation, but it's slowly getting there. Like we discussed before, Wyoming is a good example, and maybe also Ohio and I think South Dakota or something like that are really good examples where it's becoming very easy and just standardized to conduct tokenization. It's not like in Europe, we actually don't see any really good destinations yet, and it is just too complicated, and it's often over-regulated. In my view, tokenized company equity should not need any extra regulation or any particular regulation. It's just a digital version of company equity, and it should be supported by the normal regulation or just by making minor modifications to normal regulation, and not inventing new types of asset classes, tokens, and new types of actors in the financial system in order to facilitate it, which we are seeing done in many countries, just overcomplicating and over-regulating.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you for your answer. We see that on the market of STO or tokenization is extremely competitive. So there are a lot of STO providers with different services. So what is your competitive strategy to stay afloat? So what is your key focus in DigiShares?
Our key focus is to focus on white labeling. We don't do any tokenization on our own brand name. We have a business model and a software platform that is fully focused on white labeling. So we work with partners and we try to enable them to get started as soon as possible, as easily as possible. So that's our core focus. The other focus that we have is a focus on real estate. We believe real estate is the single biggest asset class that is relevant for tokenization. So even though our platform is completely generic and can be used for any kind of asset, we try to focus in that direction because that's where we see the greatest interest. And actually, I don't see so much competition as you indicate. We don't view the industry as that competitive. Normally, when we speak to clients, they haven't actually assessed many different providers. Only 1 or 2 or 3 normally come up. So I think the market is huge. It's open for. There's room enough for many different business models and for many different strategies going into different niches.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the real estate market. So everybody says that real estate is the best industry for tokenization, and we see a lot of traction in this industry. We have a lot of STO providers that have a successful STO directly in real estate. So in your opinion, what other industry can benefit greatly from tokenization?
That's a good question. I think generally we see if you expand real estate, you get to real assets generally. So it's anything like infrastructure, energy projects like solar and wind, expensive automobiles. So any kind of more expensive real asset that can be purchased as an investment object, I think is generally the market segment where we see the most interest. And not only that, we also see the best cases for tokenization because tokenization in itself is risky. And if you combine a risky project with a risky framework for it, you get 2 times risky, and that's maybe not so good. So it's better to work with asset classes that are more stable and more trustworthy when you are looking to use a new type of framework for it. In our viewpoint, but we see a lot of interest also from different types of equity crowdfunding for startups or later stage companies for different sort of niches in that. I think that might be sort of the second largest segment that we see, but generally we are sort of not so happy about startup crowdfunding with tokenization. We think it's a difficult proposition because there are normally no natural community around a lot of the companies, so it's difficult for them to attract investors. Whereas it's much easier for real estate, where there is an established base of investors who are interested.
One of the biggest problems, I would say, for startups at early stages is that nobody knows about them, and without traction, attracting investors is complicated. But I'm actually quite positive about startups at somewhat later stages, such as round A.
Yeah.
Because when you do
Yes.
have users already, for example, one of the clients in our pipeline is a gaming company with 500,000 users. Everybody of them is a potential investors. And this is, I would say, fascinating. You mentioned previously that one of the things that people consider most important for mass adoption is actually secondary markets. And I'm interested to hear your opinion on that. Obviously, for smaller investors, secondary market is even more important, and they're even more suited to trading on Robinhood or crypto exchanges and have an ability to sell instantly and not in 10 years. But on the other hand, the liquidity on the secondary markets now, the open finance or Archex, is limited and they're only emerging. So on your opinion, what is the future of secondary markets for digital securities when they're going to get enough traction to be attractive for mass investor?
That's a really good question, and I have an opinion about that. I'm actually quite skeptical. towards the security token exchanges getting a lot of traction in, for instance, real estate. Next year, we might get 100 or 200 real estate STOs out, and the year after that, it could be 1,000. I don't think it's realistic to expect to see much liquidity in all of these different real estate properties because there'll be so many of them. It'll be very difficult for the investors to assess and to devise an investment strategy and to create a portfolio in this segment. And if you look at startup crowdfunding, and if you have 1,000 or 10,000 startups that are listed on security token exchanges, it will be exactly the same. You will not get any significant degree of liquidity. I think the liquidity will occur on a few very large, very visible projects, but not on the majority of the projects that are maybe 90% or 95% that are so small and that are maybe only sort of recognized by people who are within the community or within the local region of the real estate development project. So I'm actually not convinced that the security token exchanges will resolve the problems that we are seeing now with liquidity in the industry, and I'm curious to see what will happen. As you're saying, they are not really successful yet. They only listed a few tokens, and there's almost zero liquidity in any of zero trading activity. Yes, so I remained a bit skeptical about that, but of course we will see what happens.
I tend to agree. Actually, even already in the US, for example, we have listed micro cap securities with a market capitalization of a few hundred millions, and they are not having too much liquidity. So this is even more true about STO that having market cap of like 10 million. This is inherent limitation on how liquid there may be. So probably we'll be seeing either P2P kind of trading. And one of the things in our scope of work, scope of the development, is actually thinking on how we can create a compliant P2P market for securities that probably is simpler from perspective of given liquidity. And on the other hand, what may be interesting on exchanges are actually investment products that, for example, combine many real estate securities or many startups. This try to exposure to the whole sector, and this may be more interesting, I assume.
I totally agree. Actually, I was going to say that, but I forgot it. It's a really good point. I think you will see a lot of potential for creating AI-based trading robots and so forth that are able to syndicate and create large investment funds or investment strategies into all of these different tokens. So that might create some liquidity eventually and put value into the market. I think that's a good, really good point.
Claus, thank you for your reply, and thank you generally for this interview and very, I would say, realistic view on the industry and where it is going. And probably in the hype cycle, we lack having a clear view of what is the real problem and how we should move. So I thank you for these inputs.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Claus.